Welcome to History Zettel. If you are new here, this channel investigates the forgotten operations, unsolved mysteries, and buried evidence of the Second World War. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next case. On the morning of June 4th, 1942, Commander Clarence Wade McCluskey was running out of time. His fuel gauges were dropping toward empty. His 33 Douglas SPD Dauntless dive bombers had been circling over an empty stretch of the Pacific Ocean for nearly an hour, searching for a Japanese carrier fleet that should have been there, but was not. The intelligence had been precise, the timing had been calculated, and yet the vast blue expanse below offered nothing but open water. Most officers in his position would have turned back. That decision, made in the cockpit of a dive bomber somewhere north of Midway Atoll, would alter the course of the Pacific War. Within 90 minutes of McCluskey's choice to keep searching, 3 of Japan's 4 fleet carriers would be burning wrecks. The Imperial Japanese Navy's striking power, built over a decade and hardened by 6 months of unbroken victories, would be effectively destroyed before the afternoon was out. The instrument of that destruction was not a battleship, not a submarine, and not a torpedo. It was a rusting trail of white foam on the surface of the sea, the wake of a single Japanese destroyer. What followed is remembered as the turning point of the Pacific War. To understand what happened on June 4th, it is necessary to understand what Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto believed he was doing. The architect of the Pearl Harbor attack, Yamamoto had spent the early months of 1942 overseeing a cascade of Japanese victories across the Pacific and Indian Oceans. The carriers of the Kido Butai, Japan's mobile carrier striking force, had ranged from Hawaii to Ceylon, sinking Allied warships and establishing Japanese dominance across an enormous arc of ocean. By April of 1942, Yamamoto was confident that one final stroke could eliminate American carrier power entirely, forcing a negotiated peace before American industrial capacity could be brought to bear. His plan, codenamed Operation MI, was built around Midway Atoll, a tiny American base in the Central Pacific. Yamamoto calculated that any threat to Midway would draw out the remnants of the American Pacific Fleet, which his numerically superior force would then destroy in a decisive engagement. The plan involved over 150 warships in multiple coordinated groups, including 4 fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, under Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo. The operation was massive, complex, and predicated entirely on American ignorance. That assumption was fatally wrong. In the basement of a building at Pearl Harbor, a small team of United States Navy cryptanalysts under Commander Joseph Rochefort had been methodically breaking the Japanese naval code designated JN-25. By May of 1942, Rochefort's team had identified the target of the next Japanese operation, a location referred to in Japanese communications only as AF. To confirm the identification, the American base at Midway was instructed to transmit an uncoded message reporting a shortage of fresh water. Within days, Japanese radio operators were relaying the news that AF was short of fresh water. The trap was confirmed. Admiral Chester Nimitz knew exactly where Yamamoto was going and approximately when he planned to arrive. Nimitz scrambled everything he had. Task Force 16, built around the carriers Enterprise and Hornet under Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance, was already at sea. Task Force 17, centered on Yorktown under Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher, presented a more complicated problem. Yorktown had been damaged at the Battle of the Coral Sea in May, and Navy engineers estimated it needed 90 days of repairs. Nimitz gave them 72 hours. Working around the clock, repair crews at Pearl Harbor's dry dock performed what many considered a minor miracle, making Yorktown sufficiently battle-worthy to sail. On May 30th, 1942, the carrier departed Pearl Harbor with workmen still aboard, completing repairs while underway. By the 1st of June, all 3 American carriers were in position, northeast of Midway, lying in wait. Nagumo, for his part, believed he was sailing into a relatively low-risk operation. His carriers had suffered no losses since Pearl Harbor. His air crews were the most experienced in the world, veterans of operations across 3 oceans. He had no idea that the Americans knew he was coming, and 3 American carriers were positioned to intercept him. His strike plan for the morning of June 4th was methodical and confident. He would launch half his aircraft, 108 planes, against the Midway base at dawn, keep the remaining half armed and ready for anti-ship operations should any American warships appear, and then recover and rearm the first wave for a follow-up strike if needed. The attack on Midway commenced at 0630. The American base absorbed significant damage, but its airfield remained functional. Marine Corps fighters scrambled to intercept, flying a mixture of Brewster F-2A Buffaloes and Grumman F-4F Wildcats that were outclassed by the escorting Japanese Zero fighters. The Marines lost more than half their aircraft in the engagement. However, the Midway base itself survived operational. The strike commander, Lieutenant Joichi Tominaga, radioed back that a second attack on Midway would be necessary to neutralize its defenses. At 7:15, Nagumo made the decision that would seal his carrier's fate. He ordered the reserve aircraft to be rearmed with land attack bombs suitable for striking the Midway airfield, replacing the torpedoes and armor-piercing bombs they had been carrying in anticipation of anti-ship operations. The rearming process was laborious. Torpedoes had to be hoisted back down into the hangar decks, bombs brought up, aircraft prepared. Technicians worked as quickly as they could, but the process would take the better part of an hour. 25 minutes into the rearming, at 7:40, a delayed report arrived from one of Nagumo's scout aircraft. The scout, launched late due to a catapult malfunction aboard the cruiser Tone, had spotted a large formation of American ships to the east, but had failed to specify whether any carriers were present. Nagumo suspended rearming and waited for clarification. The clarification, confirming the presence of at least one carrier, did not arrive until 8:20. By then, Nagumo faced an impossible choice. His reserve aircraft were partially rearmed with the wrong weapons. His first wave was returning low on fuel and ammunition and needed to land, and an American carrier force was closing from the east. He ordered the weapons switched back to anti-ship configuration and scheduled launch for after the first wave had been recovered. Aboard the 3 American carriers, the morning had been chaos of a different kind. Nimitz had ordered his forces to strike at the first opportunity, and beginning at around 7 in the morning, aircraft from Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown had been launched in waves toward the estimated Japanese position. The problem was coordination. Dive bombers, torpedo bombers, and fighter escorts flew at different speeds and altitudes. Without reliable radio communication, and with the Japanese fleet maneuvering, the separate formations struggled to locate their targets. The Hornet's dive bombers missed the Japanese entirely and returned without finding them. The torpedo squadrons, flying slow, vulnerable TBD devastators at low altitude, did find the Kido Butai, and what happened to them constitutes one of the most devastating and consequential sacrifices in the history of air warfare. Torpedo Squadron 8 from Hornet, 15 aircraft under Lieutenant Commander John Waldron, was the first to find the Japanese carriers. Waldron had no fighter escort. He had deviated from the flight plan he considered incorrect, following his own navigation, and found the enemy when no one else had. He led his men straight in at low altitude against the full strength of the Japanese combat air patrol and shipborne anti-aircraft fire. All 15 devastators were shot down. Not a single torpedo struck a Japanese ship. The sole survivor of Torpedo Squadron 8, Ensign George Gay, spent the next 30 hours floating in the Pacific, watching the battle continue around him from the water. Torpedo squadrons from Enterprise and Yorktown followed, suffering losses of similar proportion. Of 41 devastators launched from the 3 carriers, only 6 returned to their ships, and not one had successfully struck a Japanese vessel. The Japanese Combat Air Patrol, the agile Mitsubishi Zero fighters, had descended to sea level to destroy the slow torpedo planes, and they remained there, their altitude advantage gone, waiting for more threats from below. They were not looking up. At 10:22 on the morning of June 4th, 1942, Commander McCluskey's dive bombers arrived over the Kido Butai. His fuel state was critical. He had found the Japanese fleet by following the destroyer Arashi, which had been detached to depth charge an American submarine and was racing back to rejoin Nagumo's force at high speed, its white wake cutting a visible line across the ocean. McCluskey followed the wake. 10 minutes later, smoke appeared on the horizon. Yorktown's dive bomber squadron, 17 aircraft under Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie, arrived almost simultaneously from a different direction, having taken a more direct course and encountered no difficulties finding the target. By sheer coincidence, 3 American dive bomber squadrons found themselves positioned above the Japanese carriers within minutes of each other. The Japanese fighter cover, exhausted and at low altitude after 90 minutes of combat against the torpedo planes, was not in position to intercept. Beginning at 10:22, McCluskey's squadron split between Akagi and Kaga. A miscommunication caused both Enterprise squadrons to initially dive at Kaga. Lieutenant Richard Best, leading a division of the Enterprise group, recognized the error and pulled out, redirecting his small force north toward Akagi. On Kaga, the remaining Dauntlesses delivered 3 to 5 direct hits. One bomb landed on or near the bridge, killing Captain Jisaku Okada and most of the ship's senior officers. Fires broke out among the armed aircraft on the hangar deck, where the partially completed rearming process had left torpedoes, bombs, and fuel lines in close proximity. The damage control situation became impossible within minutes. On Akagi, Nagumo's flagship, a single bomb from Lieutenant Best's small formation struck the edge of the amidship's elevator and penetrated to the upper hangar deck. It exploded among armed and fueled aircraft. Chief of Staff Ryunosuke Kusaka later described what he saw as a terrific fire, bodies all over the place. A second explosion underwater very close astern bent the flight deck upward and damaged the rudder. Nagumo was forced to transfer his flag from Akagi to a light cruiser, watching his flagship burn as he departed. To the south, simultaneously, Yorktown's dive bombers under Lieutenant Commander Leslie struck Soryu. The first bomb hit directly on the large rising sun emblem painted on the flight deck. A second bomb penetrated to the second hangar deck. A third struck near the number 3 elevator. All 3 bombs found their way into a hangar packed with aircraft being rearmed. Fires took hold along nearly the entire length of the ship, and 30 minutes after the attack began, Captain Ryusaku Yanagimoto ordered the ship abandoned. 3 carriers were on fire. The entire engagement had lasted approximately 4 minutes. The 4th Japanese carrier, Hiryu, survived the initial strike. Under Rear Admiral Tamon Yamaguchi, it immediately launched a counterattack. 2 waves of aircraft found the Yorktown and struck her 3 times with bombs and twice with torpedoes, leaving her dead in the water and eventually causing her to be abandoned. Yorktown would be sunk by a Japanese submarine 2 days later while under tow, the only American carrier lost at Midway. But Hiryu's reprieve was brief. At 1700 hours, 24 Dauntlesses from Enterprise, led by Lieutenant Earl Gallagher, struck Hiryu, scoring 4 direct hits that set it ablaze beyond control. Rear Admiral Yamaguchi chose to go down with his ship, as did Hiryu's captain. He was described as one of the most talented flag officers in the Imperial Japanese Navy. By the morning of June 5th, all 4 Japanese fleet carriers had been sunk or scuttled. Japan had lost approximately 248 aircraft and over 3,000 personnel, including a disproportionate number of the experienced carrier aviators, who had no immediate replacements. The Americans lost the Yorktown, the destroyer Hammond, 147 aircraft, and 307 men, a substantial cost, but not a catastrophic one. What Midway actually cost Japan was harder to measure in the immediate aftermath. The carriers Akagi and Kaga had been part of the Pearl Harbor strike force. Soryu and Hiryu had fought from the Indian Ocean to the Coral Sea. Their loss, and the loss of their air groups, represented accumulated experience and capability that Japan's industrial base, stretched thin by a 2-front war in China and now engaged across the Pacific, could not rapidly replace. Admiral Nimitz, reflecting on McCluskey's decision to keep searching rather than return, stated it had decided the fate of our carrier task force and our forces at Midway. It may have decided rather more than that. The 41 torpedo bomber crews who found and attacked the Japanese carriers, knowing their aircraft were too slow and their attack angles too predictable, kept flying anyway. Not one devastator turned away before being shot down or dropping a torpedo. They achieved the tactical result of exactly 0. But they may have achieved the most consequential act of the battle. Whether the outcome of Midway was inevitable, given American foreknowledge of the Japanese operation, or whether it balanced on the edge of catastrophe throughout the morning of June 4th, remains a question historians continue to debate. What is not in dispute is what the 4 minutes on that Thursday morning accomplished. 3 carriers that had struck Pearl Harbor, raided Ceylon, and helped establish Japanese dominance across an ocean were gone. The offensive initiative in the Pacific War passed to the United States and would not return to Japan. 2.5 years of grinding, costly war still remained, but the direction of it was now fixed. Thank you for watching. If this investigation gave you something to think about, please comment, like, and share. Subscribe to History Zettel and join us for the next one. The file is never truly closed.